Selene Vega is a core faculty member of Saybrook University, where she's teaching mind-body medicine. She is a psychotherapist. She is a dancer. And when I looked at her website to think about what I was going to say about her today, I stuck with the words, it's all about movement. And I was just so reminded of her beautiful ability to remind people about their ability to move, about us moving with the world in our bodies, having freedom in that. And I think that's going to be so exciting for the subject of the call today, which is going to be what if you don't know your ancestors or have feelings that you don't know where they come from? And with that, I'm going to hand over to Celine.
Thank you, Achim. And I think you gave the high points there. And it's the movement piece is very much a part of who I am and how I see the world and how I interact with the world a lot. And it's I will say that it's something that I had to get used to the idea that everyone else doesn't do that, and that part of my calling is to remind everyone that they can, that we have these bodies that we were born into, and we might as well use them uh, as our way of connecting with the world and with each other and with ourselves. So I do work a lot with the body, but it's certainly not. It's not always the theme. Often I'll have a theme, and then I find that the body is a wonderful vehicle for exploring that theme. So our theme for today, in this larger realm of ancestors, what Julian gave me as a topic, and I really did leave it open to him. It's like, what's the piece that's needed here, in all of the ancestor work that you're doing in this little series? And the question was, well, what about those who uh, don't have that kind of actual connection with ancestors? Maybe you were adopted, or maybe your family just disconnected from anyone in the past, or so many reasons why we might not have any sense of who our ancestors actually are. And does that mean that we don't get to have that connection, that we don't get to have that source of wisdom, guidance, sense of belonging and connection that we can have by having a sense of some lineage or some place that we came from? And of course, no, it doesn't mean that. We get to have it. We just have to find it in different ways. It may not be a family tree that we can look at out in the world and say, oh yeah, here's where I'm situated. Here's where I am, and I can see where my parents were, and I can see where they came from. I just want to say there are really two different avenues for exploring those real lineages, and one of them is just DNA. I mean, we actually have more and more opportunity these days to go exploring and find out a little bit more about where did we come from. And for a lot of people, it's quite a surprise. I don't know if any of you have seen the short video of I don't remember the name of the group that did this, but they invited a number of people from different places in the world, really, um, to have their DNA done, to do their spitting of the saliva into the tube and finding out where did their ancestors come from. And of course, they spoke to these people beforehand and um, were assured by each of them what they were convinced was their background and their ancestry. Oh, I am 100% of whatever it was, British, German, Icelandic, um, Turkish, whatever. And then they got the, and they were also asked, and who of all the people in the world are the ones that you dislike or don't feel comfortable with? And they all had someone to name, some group that their cultural background viewed as somehow the other. And then they did their DNA and came back to find out the results and discovered every single one of them that they had all kinds of background that was completely unexpected for them, and that often they actually did have at least part of them that had come from those places that they were so convinced were the other, and that were not, if not quite the enemy, were something that they were uncomfortable with, and yet here it was part of who they were. So our ancestries are very complex, and when we do those DNA searches, we do find out some interesting things. And I've just recently done mine, so I've had the opportunity to begin to see. I don't think I had a whole lot of surprises about where my people come from, but I have had some interesting surprises of connections that are there that no one would have guessed. I just got to discover that my father and my mother, who, well, yes, they both come from areas of the world that are similar, maybe villages that weren't so distant from each other, but it turns out that they are possibly sixth cousins. Now, that's a lot of generations back, but it was still a big surprise to all of us. And we're still investigating further to see if we can find out anything that leads us to real information about that. But so these are interesting things to discover, but they don't necessarily give us that sort of satisfying sense of this person is there for me in my background. This is part of who I am. We can begin to invite a sense of those people who show up on our DNA family tree, but they're unknowns in a lot of ways. We don't necessarily have any stories about them that were told to us, or that we have any idea about what their lives looked like, except investigating in a more abstract way, how did people in that area of the world live at that particular time? But it's a distant sense of connection, but it's something that we can explore and play with. The other way of exploring is really just going in and seeing what shows up. And I think that's part of the what if you have a feeling but you don't know what it is part. It's like there's something in me that doesn't have any connection to the way I was raised or the communities around me. And I don't have a picture in my mind of who that might be that gave me that part of myself. Sometimes people grow up feeling like a stranger. I know I had some sense of that when I was growing up, really a sense of not quite belonging and feeling like perhaps I was from some other planet and the aliens would come down and pick me up at some point. And I was really waiting for that. I wanted that because I felt like I don't belong here. I don't fit in to my community, to the culture that's around me. And so I must have some place that I do belong to that could give me that sense of belonging, and maybe they'll come and find me. And I don't know if any of you have had a similar kind of feeling growing up of not fitting in, not belonging, feeling different, and wondering if there is a place that you might belong. I think sometimes when we go searching for our ancestors, that is part of what we're looking for is, can I find that sense of belonging somewhere else since I don't necessarily feel it here in my life as it is with the people who are around me? So one way to think about ancestors is that we don't really have to limit ourselves to our genetic ancestors. It is interesting to find out something about them. But that's not the only place where we might find our sense of belonging or our sense of someone or someone's plural who came before us, who might have some guidance or something to offer us about how we can live more comfortably in the world, how we can find our sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. So I've come up with 4 different kinds of ancestors to play with. And the first one we might call genetic ancestors. That's ones we've been talking about. It's often what people are referring to when they talk about my ancestors. My ancestors came from where? Mine seem to have come pretty much from the Ukraine, actually, way back when, and areas that move back and forth from being Russia to being Ukraine to being, I'm not even sure what the entire history is of the area where my families all came from on all sides. And I actually don't have lots of influences of other things. I have a pretty uh, pure line of Ashkenazi Jews all the way back through Ukraine and everywhere else. That's what my lineage is. But that's not the only place where I take my sense of who I am. So that was the first ancestor way of understanding ancestors. The second one we might call life connection ancestors. I'm still looking for a good term for this, but those are the people who we maybe have known in our lives, who have touched us in some way, and now they are no longer with us. They have died, they've passed on. And and yet that sense of who they were and how they touched us and what they meant to us and that connection that we actually had in life is still with us. I have a number of those. I think one of the first ones that comes to my mind is a woman named Dean Brown, who was the head of the Spiritual Emergence Network and invited me to get involved with that network. Um, for a while, I was editor of their newsletter. She invited me to do that. And she was a psychotherapist here in Santa Cruz, California, along with me, when I was just learning to be a psychotherapist. And I saw her very much as a model for how I wanted to be as a therapist. She had a lot of compassion, a lot of caring, was someone who often got invited in to be mediator in struggles that groups and organizations were having. And in fact, there were a few times when she and I both were invited in together, and I got to learn so much from her. And I learned a lot from the way that she passed on as well, and the way she felt like she was old and her body was really, it was going, and she felt very ready for whatever might be next. And she wasn't sure exactly what that would be, but I loved watching her curiosity and wonder about what her next stage would be as she left this body. So Dean is very much, I consider, an ancestor, even though there was no genetic connection between us at all. She touched me, part of my life connection ancestry. And then the third kind we might call inspirational ancestors. And those were those that we look at who maybe were famous in some way. Maybe they were famous in the field of knowledge that we're involved in. Maybe they were just well known in the world and books were written about them and stories are told about them. And I would call those inspirational ancestors, the ones that we look to as what's possible for a human being to be in their time here. I think about Gandhi, for example, might be very much an inspirational ancestor for me. Martin Luther King is another one. And these are people who were people. They had their difficulties. I'm sure if we heard all the stories about them, we would know that they weren't all perfect. And yet they lived in their lives and did some things that made a difference, and that they can be an inspiration for us. And when I go inviting in ancestors, the inspirational ancestors that I think of are an important part of that. I want them in the circle of those who have gone on, who I might look to for guidance and for support and for help in living my life, just based on what they were able to offer in their lives and what their kind of spirit presence might still be able to offer me. And then the fourth category of ancestors we might think about here are spiritual ancestors. If we have a particular spiritual path that we follow, we might look to those who are the lineage of that path, those who were the original teachers. I know a lot of my friends who practice Aikido, for example, consider the founder of Aikido to be one of their spiritual ancestors, and they look to him for guidance, for how to be, because Aikido is more than just a martial art having to do with the body. Of course, many of the martial arts are more than just a fighting technique or a physical practice. They have to do with a spiritual path, a way of being in the world and of relating to ourselves and the rest of the world and whatever might go beyond the physical world. So those spiritual ancestors can be uh, those whose spirits we invite to come in. So if we don't have anyone in our genetic ancestry that we know about, there's still plenty of opportunities to reach out for ancestors who can be there for us and who I believe are quite willing in whatever form that energy exists, that it's available to us. You know, whether or not we have a sense of what happens to us when we die. And some religious traditions do have very specific ideas about that, which we may subscribe to or not. I know for me, I leave that open until I have more information, and having not died yet myself, at least that I have memories of, I can't say whether reincarnation is the way or whether there's some other way that our energy moves into some other form. I don't know, but I do believe that we have access to the energies and spirits of those who have lived before. Uh, my ex-husband from many, many, many years ago used to speak about the Cosmic Switchboard, the idea that anyone who has ever lived, um, their entire life story and all of who they were, their energy, their soul, you might say, all are stored in that kind of cosmic switchboard, and that we all have access to that. We can open ourselves to the energy that's there, and we can pick and choose what parts of that switchboard of energy we want to plug into. We don't have to get the entire download of everyone who's ever lived, including the ones that might be traumatic for us. So the other piece of the title of today's work was, what if you have a feeling but you don't know what it is? And I think we don't necessarily have to know in order to be able to work with whatever we have moving and shaking in us. If it's there, then it's there, I think, for a reason, and for us to have access to and work with and use and see how we want to be in relationship with it. How do we do that? And how do we go looking for a feeling if we don't have one? If we feel a yearning for something, but we haven't actually had a sense of how to connect with something, and maybe we feel somewhat abandoned by the ancestors because we don't have anything to grab onto yet. So how do we find that? I think one of the ways that we can go looking for that is through the place that we live, and maybe what ancestors are hanging around there. You know, I live in territory that is Native American, and so I might want to open myself to who has lived here before, whose lands were these, and you know whose spirits walked this same earth that I walk every day as I move back and forth in this place that I live. That might be one place that I could begin to open up to see who's there. Another place I can look to is, what am I drawn to? I know that my mother speaks of having the whole early part of her life being very, very drawn to music from India, sitar music and tabla music, that she would go searching for all of that, and just felt like there was some sense of familiarity in that music for her. I know I've felt that a little bit about Balinese music and Javanese music. There's something in me that just so deeply resonates to that music. Sometimes it's about food. What foods are we drawn to from other places, other cultures? All the things that we surround ourselves with that somehow speak to us are places we can begin to open ourselves to for some of that connection to something that is a lineage and ancestry that may not be genetic for us, but may be very meaningful to us. I think there too about something my grandfather said to me once when I was a teenager, and I was pretty much rejecting a lot of the religious traditions that he was very attached to. And he said, but I can see by the things that, the pictures that you put on your wall, that you are very spiritual. It's like, yes, I did feel that, but I didn't know what that spirituality was. I didn't feel connected to what I'd been given in Sunday school. But I did feel like there was something and I had a yearning for it. So I think he was giving me a clue there. What were those pictures that I put on my walls that felt meaningful? And where might there be some connections to something that came before me to connect to in those pictures, those drawings, those pieces of art that had been with us for a very long time, some of them. They came from ancient times, some of them. And what we're looking for is sometimes that sense of belonging. Where do I belong? Where is there someone who will claim me and say, here, you are what's next. I've left this world and I leave it to you and those like you to carry on something that I believed in, felt strongly about, sensed as my purpose in life. I have left that for you to carry on. That kind of a sense of belonging, to be claimed in that way, that's what I'm looking for when I go looking for ancestors. So let's see, I have lost track of time, where I have probably spoken for more than my 15 minutes that I was thinking I would. But I think it's time perhaps to enter into a meditation where we can begin to explore some of that. And some of my favorite ways of exploring are, of course, working with the body, and working with the body in a couple of different ways. One of them is feeling into it. What do I experience in here in this body? Because we often just kind of perch ourselves on chairs here and all it's showing is our faces. And we think that this is all there is, but we have an entire body with sensations and experiences that can lead us to some of the answers we're looking for sometimes. Not necessarily in words, although sometimes we can find the words after we've explored a little bit, the places that are beyond words and that come in through sensations and through feelings. The other way that I work with movement is as a way of expressing. And again, that often happens beyond words. So I might kind of ask my body, how, if I had to express how I'm feeling right now, what would that look like? And then just sort of wait to see what happens. And, it feels very different to have my arms raised and open to the skies. And that's maybe how I'm feeling in this moment. And that is very, very different than if I experience myself in what my body has just provided as an answer for what I'm feeling right now. That's going to feel very different than if my body did this. And that's going to provide me with a very different experience if I follow that process that my body leads me into, if I pull into a kind of a hug for myself and bring my energy in and around myself. So those are, just two things that came in this moment for me, and there's so many other possibilities. When I let my body just do what it seems to want to do if I don't stop it. And often we have lots of messages in the world that tell us it's not okay to do those things, that we are supposed to sit in a certain way, and our posture should be a certain way, and our facial expression should be a certain way. And if we let go of all of those prohibitions, really, on what's okay, and let our bodies have permission to do whatever they are wanting to do, even if it seems odd or awkward or weird, there's a lot there to learn from. So as I open us into this meditation, I want to invite you to start from a place that allows your body to move. So maybe that's sitting. I'm sitting on a ball right now. This is where I'm sitting, which allows me to do a lot of movement. If you're sitting in a chair that it feels kind of crunched in and doesn't give you room to move, you might want to try doing this from someplace else where you really do have room to stretch yourself out. Or you might do this standing, or you might do this lying down on the ground, on the floor, if that feels comfortable and you have some room to move without running into the furniture around you too badly. So find a place to place your body for this time that we're going to spend doing some inner exploration. And yes, if you've hurt some part of you, if you have some part of you either that in this moment is injured and needs some special way of being, that's perfectly fine. Maybe there's some part of you that is always that way. And I want to say that I've worked with people who are in wheelchairs, I've worked with people who are paralyzed. Movement is whatever is available to your body at this particular moment in time. And it doesn't have to look a certain way or be a certain way. It's really what your body offers and gives you access to in this moment. So, finding your way into that comfortable place, that place that you can settle in for a little bit and allow yourself to be held by whatever is underneath you. Maybe that's just the floor under your feet. Maybe it's a chair or a piece of furniture underneath your butt. Maybe it's the floor or a bed or a couch underneath your whole body. Wherever you have perched yourself, wherever you have placed your body, really take the time in this moment to allow your weight to drop into that place, to allow the place where you are to hold you, to really support you from underneath, so that you don't have to work hard to be where you are. You want to see what muscles are actually needed to keep you in the position that you have chosen to be in. So if you're upright, there may be some muscles in your back, in your neck, that are holding you in this position gently, keeping you from falling over. But everything else can begin to let go. You might begin to explore. Is there some place in your neck, in your head, in your face that can release, that's not needed for you to be right where you are? Just finding the places that are still holding, as if they were needed to keep you in this position. And noticing which ones are really not needed, that can release. You might want to explore a little bit along the way. Perhaps you can roll shoulders, maybe use your hands to massage or touch as a way of reminding places in your body that it's okay for them to relax. It's okay for them to just allow themselves to be held, to drop down into the ground underneath you. And you might tune into your breath as part of this process, seeing if you can bring your breath to some of those places to help release and relax, to allow a quieting down of muscular tension, a softening of places that don't need to hold on, an opening up of places that have felt like you had to hold them on. And here, as you realize that you don't need to hold anything except the very barest bits to keep you in place. And if you're lying down, really pretty much everything can release. And your breath can find its way to move, not just in the ways that breathing happens, coming in through nose or mouth and traveling into lungs to expand and to release, but to imagine that breath moving through all the different places in your body. Maybe traveling to places that are asking for attention. Maybe the hurt places, places where you know you have problems or struggles. Just imagining you can bring your breath to those places. Just finding the quiet. And in that quiet, noticing even the movement of your thoughts, the flow that's there, just as your breath moves in and out, your thoughts can move through. And just as you wouldn't try to hold on to one breath for too long, you can use thoughts and images that move through in the same way. Allow them to come in the way they do, like a breath, and to flow out again just as easily. And in this space of opening to breath and allowing that movement of breath, thoughts, feelings, images, you might begin now to create an invitation. Maybe it's like a prayer. Maybe it's really like an invitation that you might send out, inviting a friend or friends, family to a gathering. And this invitation is going out into the realm of ancestors, those who have gone on and are no longer in bodies, but who have left behind something of all that they were when they lived. They've left behind some of their wisdom, some of what they learned from the mistakes they made, some of what they learned in doing what they did in their lives. Some of just who they became as they lived. Some of the meaning that they made of what it is to be alive. And in that invitation that you send out, you can ask for just what would be helpful to you right now in your life. And perhaps it's just one life energy visitor, or perhaps it's a whole gathering, a circle, a community to surround you. Perhaps it's some wisdom that you're looking for in this moment, very present questions that you have. Perhaps it's a longer term relationship that you would like to have with the guidance and presence of some ancestor of some kind. That invitation can go out to those you've known who had an impact on you in some way in your life. That invitation can go out to those you've known of, those whose stories have inspired you, those whose lives have reminded you of what was possible for a human being or another kind of being. Those who are inspirational, who knew things, who did things, who left behind some wisdom, but there may be more for them to offer to you. Something more direct, more specific for you and the questions you have and the yearning that you have for guidance, for support. From what their stories tell you they might have to offer. And maybe there are some genetic ancestors that you don't know of, but perhaps their energy is still connected through the DNA that courses through your body. Perhaps some ancestor that you have no idea about might want to come and offer some guidance, some sense of connection to you in your life now. And the last place of invitation is those spiritual ancestors, someone you know of, part of the stories of your lineage. Maybe a name that you know, maybe just a sense of others who have traveled the spiritual path that you are on, even if it doesn't have a name. Others who have gone on, but who might recognize in you a lineage, a sense that you are carrying forth what they were also moving with in their lives. And then as that invitation spreads out into the world and beyond the physical world that we know, into the planes that we don't really understand yet, reverberating into places that we don't yet know how to name. Coming back to this body, this being that you exist in here on this plane, and beginning to feel into how you might be receiving as some of those invitations are responded to, and some of those ancestors' energies may come to visit. And perhaps it happens in your breath as you breathe in, and now you're breathing in something that is beyond just the air around you. In some traditions, there's a sense that we are breathing in the energy, life force energy as we breathe. It goes beyond the oxygen and other elements that are in the air. It's the energies of life. Perhaps your breath can carry some of the energies of these ancestors that you have invited to visit. And seeing how your body might open to receive that energy. Feeling it not just in muscles and bones, feeling it in your cells, feeling it in the fluids that move through you. Because there is always movement in us. Every moment there is movement inside of us. Even when it looks like our bodies are still, there is movement. Can you open those places of movement Those places where the breath brings in energy and the heart pumps it through. Can you allow in some of the energies of some ancestor of some kind to move you, to allow your body to resonate with that energy that might be there for you? Perhaps there are images that come. Perhaps there are colors, textures, sounds, maybe even words, phrases, songs, perhaps something of nature, animal sounds, sounds of wind and water. It's taking a few moments here to allow yourself to experience whatever might be there as your breath takes it in and moves it through your being. Knowing that ancestors that come may bring many ways to communicate. Memories, images, movement. Always coming back to breath if you lose your way, if you lose the connection. Inviting it back in again with your breath. If there are questions that you are holding, that you want to pose to your ancestor energies that may be here with you, surrounding you, finding your way to bring that question out, maybe in words, maybe just in a feeling sense, maybe in a movement. Knowing that the answers you may receive might be clear in the moment, or they might be something that will come in time, something that will be revealed in dreams, something you read, something someone else says, something that resonates inside of you. And you know, ooh, this is part of the answer. Holding the question, knowing more will be revealed. And if there is an ancestor energy here, or more than one, that you feel like you can develop a relationship with, invite back, ask to help you in the longer term. This is the time to ask for that. And this is also the time to express any gratitude you might have for what has been offered, what might still be offered. For what you've already been given in your life in the way of guidance that you may not have appreciated where it came from. And then taking a moment to say goodbye, if goodbyes are appropriate here, to whoever, whatever might have come, even if it's just a feeling. And feeling back into your own sense of, here is my body, here is my being at present in a body, in this world. Letting go of anything that isn't right to bring with you into the rest of your day in this moment. And bringing back with you whatever does feel right to bring back in. Letting it integrate, find its way through your whole being in the same way that breath comes in and moves through your whole being, fueling your life energy. And when you're ready, coming back, letting your eyes open if they've been closed. And we're going to take some time to go into breakout rooms here, get a chance to share a little bit with each other, to witness and be witnessed. And that's really what this is about. It's not about advice giving, it's not about interpreting anything for anyone else. It's about holding space for each other, giving room for each person to say what's real for them, whatever that is. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to do anything other than be present and receive what has come through that person. Who knows, maybe there are messages for you in what you hear someone else's message. Welcome back, everybody.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if anyone would like to share anything that came up for them in the meditation or as they were talking in the groups. Any questions, any sharings?
I mean, I, for one, and some of my group really appreciated the chance to move. And I find that particularly helpful in meditation. And I've made a vow through our discussion to do some maybe dance movement, try and do it every day, maybe. I think that would be good for me. I think that would be
That's
good for me.
wonderful. Yeah, that's a wonderful commitment. Good. Thanks, Katie. Anyone else? Questions, thoughts, sharing?
I was stimulated by your thought of looking for ancestors in the place where we live. And I'm living in Denmark. And I thought, who has had an influence on me? And I was very moved to find out who it was and to think about all the connections we actually have with each other. This person who's gone before me. I mean, I met her when I came here, but she's died many years ago. And I'm thinking from the beyond, she's influencing my life in some way, supporting me in some way. I really like that.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks for sharing that, Pauline. Yeah.
I'm happy that you broke down the four categories of ancestors. So it's another way of looking at it. And that in the meditation, you invited our ancestors to visit with us. And that was kind of a way to connect with them. And I think very often I don't think about my ancestors. Um, Maybe I feel cut off from them. And I'd like to feel their spirit, more connected. I think it's not only, I'm not talking about genetic, but cultural ancestors and spiritual ancestors and people that were mentors to me. I'd like to find a way to connect with them more than I do in my daily life. So this was a good exercise in opening up to that kind of energy. And I think it takes a lot of practice to do that,
Yeah.
and that's why it's good to do it in a group, I guess, because we can help each other. I think it's hard to do it on your own. Yeah. And I just want to say I appreciate your gentle, everybody said they really like your gentle voice. You have a very warm way of connecting, of communicating, and that was very appreciative, as well as your content is very rich. So thank you very much.
Very, very welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does make a difference to just consciously make these invitations. And then once we've consciously made them, once we've practiced doing it, I think it's easier to feel their presence in our life, even when we're not specifically doing it in the moment, you know. And I think coming to mentors who've been part of your life that are gone now is a really important one. For me, that's a really important one. I think of the the mentors who were for me, a lot of them are academic mentors, but who really saw me. You know, they weren't just academic, they really saw me and were willing to support me in my own explorations, even if they didn't fit into the categories that had been set forth. And I'm so appreciative of those professors who were there for me and who I had a real relationship with. And they're all gone now. None of them are in the body anymore, and I'm so appreciative that I get to still have a sense of them, and how important they've been for for me developing into who I am.
Dan,
Others?
I've
Yeah?
just realized something. I'd like your thoughts about this. I'm thinking, as I imagine somebody, they become real. I don't quite, I sort of vaguely know what I mean by this, but I tended to have thought so far, if I'm imagining somebody, it's all in my head and the whole story is what I'm imagining. And I suddenly had this sense of connecting through to either that person or unknown persons. And that was almost like a breakthrough moment, I thought. It just happened. Sorry.
Oh, that's wonderful, Tony. It really is. Yeah, and I think, what does it mean to imagine? It becomes very real. We know a lot about how what's going on inside of us imaginally has an impact. I think about how athletes, for example, will practice something in their imagination and that it has an actual effect on their practice. So if I can't get out and practice throwing that ball, I can imagine myself throwing that ball and imagine what muscles are involved. And that kind of practice can be as beneficial as actually physically doing it. So what does that say about how powerful it is for it to be in our heads, in our imaginations? It has a very powerful effect on us.
I've been writing something recently, and it's involved a sailing boat. And I've never thought quite of a sailing boat as an animal. It's everything about it is natural. It's the water, it's the wind. It doesn't go anywhere unless you relate it to the winds and the tides and all that. And as I'm writing about it in my imagination, it suddenly becomes like a creature. There's more to it. And I mean, at one time I did sail boats, but I didn't. I didn't see. I mean, I saw them as solid objects, but the imagined boat was something else. Oh, so.
I love that. And I don't think it's an accident that we name our boats, that there is something to that. And the way you described it is perfect. Then it may be just sort of a solid object if it's sitting on land, but once it gets into the water and starts moving, and there's a relationship of who's working with the sails and the ropes, and there's the wind, and there's the water, and there's a life force energy there.
There's something about dreams too, because the boat is for going somewhere. Nowadays people go around the world, and some people go around and they never stop. I mean, it's a great way of expressing a dream somehow. Yeah. Wow.
Thanks.
I'm going to ask Mark if you would say what you said about the symptoms, the mindless.
Is that Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Am I back? Just my background, those who don't know me, I'm a retired GP, and I'm always fascinated in general practice in my medical career as the what symptoms were trying to tell us, or what how the unconscious, for want of a better description, was trying to communicate. And because it doesn't have a voice, it can't write or send emails or tell us. It has to do it through our bodies, through our symptoms and our illnesses. And for the difference between mindfulness and mindlessness, if we meet experience mindfully, then we can make something useful and constructive from it. And if we meet it mindlessly, then it has to turn itself into symptoms. Or some sort of metaphorical representation, so we start to take notice.
Thank you, Mark.
I think was that what I said?
Yeah, that's what I just thought it was so neat. Mindlessly, it becomes a symptom. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, very, a very important concept. Certainly a big piece of the mind-body medicine work that I'm involved with teaching. And it's the way I often will put it is that our body's giving us lots of information all the time if we're paying attention. And if we don't pay attention, it has to speak louder. And the only way it has to speak louder is for symptoms to start to emerge. So if I'm not listening to that feeling in my gut that says, there's something wrong with the way I'm living my life right now, that feeling in my gut may start turning into something that's more serious and will get me to finally reach out for help for it. And, if we're tuning in mindfully to what's happening in us, we can get those signals when they're a lot more subtle and they don't have to turn into such big, overwhelming problems. Yeah. Anyone else?
I just want to say, can you reverse a psychosomatic illness? I mean, I'm working on hips at the moment, and they seem to be getting better.
There's so much we don't understand completely about the whole process. But I would say yes, up to a point, because sometimes there's enough damage that's been done that we can't fix the damage. We can keep it from getting worse, certainly. But I think about, there's a difference between healing and curing. And sometimes there's a deep healing that can happen, and yet we can't quite cure the thing that got going. The other part of that is it's all very complicated. It's not like there's nothing there to begin with. I mean, often I'm thinking about cancer, for example. People get unfortunately blamed, I think, sometimes for their own cancers. Mark, were you going to say something there?
I've got to go off very quick, just medical background. If I can just pick up on the semantics a little bit. I agree with everything you say, and it's not really my place to be talking here because this is Selene's gig here. But I think healing, the Greek word from meaning whole, it's reintegrating these disconnected parts, which are trying to communicate with us with symptoms and stuff. Whereas curing, it means putting salt into something to preserve it and keep it going for longer and longer and longer. So if you're trying to cure something, you're actually trying to preserve it and keep it there. So that never seems like a really good idea to me at all. I don't think I've ever cured anything in my practicing lifetime as a doctor. I've never particularly wanted to. So I think the semantics are really important.
That is a really interesting piece that I had not thought of, curing being that, because it does get used as, we're going to cure this disease, but oh my goodness, what a thought that we're
Let's keep it as long as we can. And I just challenge slightly the concept of psychosomatic illness or disease, because Hippocrates said it's natural forces within us which are the true healers of disease. The problem is that thinking gets in the way and putting labels on and all the rest of it. So the work is to still the mind, and so what we seek can actually emerge from us. So the idea that psychosomatic symptoms are disease, I think is something that I would gently challenge with someone. They're not actually broken. Their unconscious is desperately trying to communicate a message to them with dis-ease. As Selene says, if you keep ignoring the messages that come, then they have to start shouting louder and just take the hyphen out and turn dis-ease into disease. And you didn't listen to me. Look here, here's a lump. Take a lump, and now will you go and get some advice or whatever? I mean, that's a very simplistic 30-second presentation.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add there is it's important to remember that there are external influences that are part of the picture. So if I'm living next to a toxic waste dump, I'm going to have some things happening in my body that are not coming from something psychosomatic. They're not. They're actually coming from something toxic that's influencing my body. But perhaps the message there is, this isn't a good place to be living. I need to move away from the toxic waste dump here. But you know, it's very complicated because there's so many pieces involved. So if there are many of us living next to the toxic waste dump and some of us are getting sick, what if it's, you know, 40% of the people next to this toxic waste dump are getting sick? Well, we know there's something going on there. It's not just that we're creating this illness because we have, you know, something internal to be paying attention to. But it is interesting, isn't it, that only 40% rather than everybody is getting sick. And what is that? What is it that makes us more vulnerable? You know, there are so many factors involved.
Lovely can of worms. I've got to go. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Take care.
But yeah, I think it is really important to not blame the victim, you know, and sometimes it does get seen that way. It's like, oh, if you're not healing, it's because you're not doing it right. You're not meditating well enough. You haven't, you know, you haven't forgiven the person who hurt you or whatever. And it's just so much more complex than that. And I think we need to bring a lot more compassion to that healing process. It's like if we're still in it and then there's a lot going on, and what is needed here? I think that's really the question that I find myself asking in any given situation with anyone who's experiencing anything is, what is it that's needed here? What is it that needs to happen for real healing to happen? And the healing may not be about the disease going or the thing that's wrong going away. I mean, if I broke my arm, I'm still going to have to wait for the bones to heal. And that's going to take the time that it takes bones to heal, you know. Even if I broke my arm because I was not being mindful enough, and maybe I've learned a lesson from that about how to more carefully walk through my surroundings so I don't break my arm next time, but I still have to wait for the arm to heal. So I think we are out of time here. And I very much appreciated being able to be with you all today to do this work
Lovely.
together.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Selene. That's
Great.
lovely.
Fantastic.
You're welcome.
Bravo.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
See you again, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Achim, as well.
Thank you. Yeah, team.
Yeah, really, thank you, Achim. I could not do it without you.